Remember, shame has to be a true public judgment. That's why shame often doesn't work one-on-one. You as an individual won't be able to shame the narcissist. But if they have a sense that there's some sort of public reckoning over their behavior or other people are aware of it, they will slink away like a little slime monster back into the swamp kind of thing. Like they'll just slide away. A little review of the Am I the Asshole, which has turned out to be a rather bit of a masterclass on talking about narcissism. So this one was actually sent to me by someone else. Thank you to all of you who are sending the good Am I the Asshole as you're seeing, because this was a good one. So this person is, I'm not even gonna, I'm gonna just give the story, because sometimes they put the big Am I the Asshole up front. Let me just go to the story. Am I the asshole for saying no to my boss after she asked me to watch her kids this weekend? Let's dig into this. So my sister is getting married this coming weekend, and I will be gone Thursday to Sunday. I've known that I would be going there for 7 months. 7 months. I would even remind my boss every month, or just so I knew she knew, I'd keep telling her. I nanny 2 amazing kids who are 6 and 8. This is the first time I have ever been asked to have some time off. My boss has always been like, oh yeah, sure, it sounds like a beautiful wedding. However, I got a text 2 hours ago saying she really needed me this weekend and she couldn't find anyone else. I was pissed, but I know how to act calm since, it's my job to stay happy and calm. I texted her back a quick apology, but said I really didn't want to miss my sister's wedding, as she's my only sibling. Well, boss woman went off the deep end and said that if I didn't show up to watch her kids this weekend, that I won't have a job come Monday. I replied with this exactly, blank. I'm so sorry that you are having a hard time looking for someone to cover. I can reach out to a few nanny friends I have and see if any of them would like to pick it up. This is a once-in-a-lifetime moment for my sister, and if it means I will lose my job, then sadly I will have to accept that. I love this job and your kids, and I hope we can work something out. I think it would devastate kid 1 and kid 2, but you do what you need, and I will accept that. The boss threw a few insults at me and said that I'm abandoning her kids. I don't know what to do. I don't want to get a new job because I work so well with these 2 kiddos. My mom told me I am an asshole for so quickly accepting that I might get fired and told me that work just sucks sometimes and you have to suck it up. It's shocking to me. Mom is the mother of the bride. Okay. Mom says I should be an adult and just miss my sister's wedding. Okay, so there's a whole thing there. I don't know. Should I? Am I really that big an asshole for saying no? No, you're not. Edit. She adds a postscript here. Just to clarify, me and my mom don't have a good relationship. Good. I didn't ask her for her advice. She was in the room with my sister, and as I was venting to my sister, I would have gone no contact at 18 if it wasn't for my dad. Can we please stop talking about it now? I have a lot of trauma from her, but that's another day. So I think she's trying to give context for the mother. So let's take this one apart. This woman is clearly not the asshole. She has one sister who's getting married. She wants to go to the wedding, and she gave 7 months' notice. So let's take apart the boss lady, though, right? So what is the main behavior we're seeing here? It's entitlement, right? And I think that, this is why no way, no how ever can somebody really survive a job when they have the sort of one-on-one, very personal role with somebody who has a lot of narcissistic features. So like nanny, personal assistant, full-time house cleaner. You cannot win at that game. And people who have to work like people like her boss, over time, it's going to take a tremendous toll on their physical and mental health. So this woman did everything right. 7 months notice. This woman had plenty of time to get something ready. She did not. This person is saying, I'll even find you options. And basically, it's almost as though the boss is drunk on her own power and her ability to be able to tell this woman, no, you can't go to your sister's wedding. The reason I feel strongly that this boss mother this boss, the boss woman, the person she's nannying for, is likely narcissistic. She's willing to throw her kids under the bus to make this point. Because she just said, I love this woman's kids. We have a great relationship. The kids probably really like this nanny. And the mother is willing to fire her for giving her 7 months' notice. So this is no matter what, you're never going to win at this job. This woman, this boss, has almost permanently ruptured the relationship with this young woman. And what concerns me, and this is the case with all of the Am I the Assholes, almost all of them, is that what is happening here? This woman is having self-doubt in a case that to any of us listening to this feels black and white. I have to say, as I read this the first time, I thought, if this happened to me, it would actually get stuck in my head. I would find myself ruminating about it. Like, are you kidding me? I gave 7 months notice and now she's saying I can't go and I'm getting it fired. So we get caught in that loop, right? That's the rumination loop that comes up when a narcissistic person shows this unempathic, arrogant, entitled kind of behavior. So we're not only in that loop, potentially facing consequences, the loss of a job with children she actually cares about, but then we question ourselves. Now we see the legacy issues too. The person who made this post has a mother who also sounds like a bit of an enabler and quite punitive. Miss your sister's wedding. I'm assuming the mother is the mother of the sister too. So miss your sister's wedding to stay and watch these kids for a boss who mistreats you and who has told you they're going to fire you after doing a really good job for them and giving them 7 months notice. So the message that this woman has always gotten from her mother is, you're the one who's wrong. Other people's feelings and experiences matter more than yours. And when people have that experience where we're not able to get a handle on really what the mom's about, but let's just say her mom's quite antagonistic. When you have that kind of an antagonistic parent who will put other people's needs first, whether it be another family member, an employer, any of that, it can really leave a person in a place as they go into adulthood where they doubt themselves because all they ever did was see their parent put other people first. And you can see that that's where this young woman, this letter writer, is stuck, is, am I the one who's blamed? Absolutely not. When we see employers behave this clearly badly, in this clearly an entitled way, it's a wake-up call that that's never, ever going to be a healthy employment situation. It sounds like she has options. It sounds like she's a good nanny, but she likely just lost a reference. So now this young woman would have to go out there, find a position in a job where word of mouth referrals go a very, very long way. So she has lost something through this, even though she did her job exactly as she should have. And that's, again, where these one-on-one employment situations with narcissists are so dangerous, because narcissistic people are so vindictive that you could do your job perfectly for years, and all it takes is one misstep at one point, which isn't going to be inevitable. You're working with a narcissist. She didn't even make a misstep. It would be one thing that you do that the narcissist refuses to budge on, and then they will start on their vindictive campaign to punish you. Like I said, you could spend years and not even get a reference or anything like that. So never, ever do you want to get into that kind of close, tight, personal one-on-one employment with somebody who's narcissistic. It will always blow up on you. You will lose a reference. You will definitely lose your mental health. Not worth it. But you can see the position she's in. No brainer. You go to your sister's wedding. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the resentment someone would feel if they said, oh, I've got to keep my job. I'm going to stay here. And some people have sometimes been stuck in those positions. They had no choice but to keep the job and would miss significant personal occasions, family weddings, family funerals. I've heard these stories directly from my clients. And they would spend the weekend or time or day in tremendous resentment and have to work for this person who now knows the power they have. Because that's the other issue here. If this woman said, okay, I won't go to my sister's wedding, she has now given the power that this boss already had was too much, now it would be up to here. And it would set a precedent that this boss would, in effect, have her in indentured servitude. Like, this woman would never really be able to escape this job until both of these kids turned 18. So I would say, quit the job, send a condolence card to whomever is stuck in this job in the future. Pity the poor kids, because let's face it, this is who their mother is. So in some ways, it's no wonder this woman did such a good job with these kids. These kids had an antagonistic mother, just like this woman did, the person who wrote the post. But like I said, this is a real wake-up call about having a narcissistic boss when you're in these close, tight relational settings. That generational damage that comes when a parent is an enabler of narcissistic people and is willing to throw you under the bus and blame you and pathologize you for wanting to do something as take the time off that you had asked for months ago. Definitely not the asshole, and a lot to learn from in this one. Well, let's talk about this one. It's a very interesting one, and as somebody who back in high school worked in these kinds of jobs, I actually found this one quite compelling. So this person is saying, I'm a high schooler. It's a high school student, high school age person, with a weekend job at a coffee shop. My coworkers who work weekends are the owner's son. He goes to my school. He's a shift manager, but it's not a real formal thing, and he's a friendly guy. And then another person who's a college student who sometimes works weekends too. So sometimes customers will come in and just be angry about such little stuff, like literally blow up about nothing. I don't know if they're in a bad mood already and looking for someone to take it out on or what, but it's a lot. Like how sad you have to be a grown-ass man taking your anger out on high school and college kids. That paragraph actually struck me because it's something that I think we're all seeing. You remember how we talk about, there's just sort of the everyday narcissism we run into in the world. I don't know if the person who behaves like this is necessarily narcissistic, but there's something missing in them, right? There has to be a lack of empathy. There's a lot of entitlement. There's a fair amount of grandiosity. There's a lot of arrogance and dysregulation. I mean, that stew sounds like narcissism, but we're seeing it everywhere. I'm sure a lot of you, you can't go anywhere, grocery store, coffee shop, you name it. So that incivility in the world, that struck me about this one. Okay, so now him and the owner's son started joking about having a little fun with some of these difficult customers and hopefully getting them off of our backs, which anyone who's ever worked in the customer service industry is like, how can we punish these people who are so difficult and mean? So one day I was at work and some guy was having a temper tantrum about how we don't make the coffee hot enough, which of course, if that dude spilled the coffee on him, then he'd be screaming you make the coffee too hot, but the guy was screaming that the coffee wasn't hot enough, which the guy, the letter writer, couldn't do a thing about because I gave it to him right out of the machine. So the owner's son came in and was like, "Sir, is there a problem here?" And the guy, the customer who wanted the hot coffee, started ranting at him too. So he was just like, he turns to the guy who wrote the letter and to the, again, the person who wrote this, am I the asshole, and said, "This is unacceptable. You're fired." Okay, so the owner's son said, "You're fired." The guy who wrote the letter said, "I started acting really sad, like, no, please don't fire me. My family needs the money. I need this job, please." And the owner's son played up being a hard ass, telling me to take off my apron and leave. The angry guy started to backtrack, like, "It isn't that big of a problem, okay? You don't need to fire her over it. I didn't mean it." And the owner's son said, "No, we pride ourselves on the best customer service." Of course, after all that drama, I still had my job. We were just acting. And we've done it a couple of times. Whenever a customer will lose their temper at anyone who works there, the owner's son will storm in and fire us. And almost every time, the person who had come in angry will apologize and say they didn't mean it. It's kind of satisfying, making people realize their actions may actually have consequences. Anyway, I was telling my friends from school about this, and a few of them thought it was a mean prank. Because there's no end to enablers, right? That it was a mean prank to let someone go away thinking that they'd gotten someone who desperately needs the money fired. Am I the asshole for this joke? No! I only wish I had thought of this when I was in high school and college, working at a fast food restaurant, and then waiting tables. Really wish I had thought of it. It's actually really brilliantly thought out because it does something interesting, right? And this right here is the mind F that is narcissism. If those customers who came in screaming about the coffee and everything had been straight up psychopaths, they wouldn't care that the person got fired. This is where narcissism really messes with us, right? Because these people who, I mean, only a deeply insecure person is going to come into a coffee shop and yell at high school and college age employees who are working for minimum wage. Only the most insecure, bullying, probably narcissistic people are going to do that, right? Well, they're different than the psychopaths. So when they see that their behavior has consequences, a strange kind of empathy comes up, and it's not real empathy. It's almost like, ooh, I did a bad thing, and they feel shame. And that shame then is like, whoa, 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 they don't need to get fired. They catch themselves. You will see this, for example, with narcissistic people who might be, like, let's say you have a manager who's narcissistic, and they yell at the people who report to them, right? Like the rank and file workers. And they're a total jerk to them. But when they have to deal with the boss above them, they're just like a whimpering sycophant, like, oh, I'll do anything you want. So you can see that transfer, that they'll sort of shapeshift and be a bit of a chameleon depending on how much power they feel they have in a situation. And that dysregulation of the coffee's not hot enough or that this isn't that enough, that they can't keep that contained and not go off on someone who probably can't do that much about it. Such a signature move of people with narcissistic personalities. I think this was a brilliant move because it was actually a really almost a living experiment. Because frankly, if they did this to someone and they didn't care, they're like, all right, get them fired. I just want some hotter coffee. That would be to me like, ooh, that's a little bit darker. But the narcissistic folks, they do not like the idea that not only would they face consequences, they don't like the idea that any of their behavior has consequences. So they really are sort of the preening, pretentious, arrogant fool until somebody says, oh, there's going to be real consequences for this. So for example, if there was a workplace event or even a social event and the narcissist did something and then many people are penalized for it, a narcissistic person would be really, really uncomfortable with that. But I think this is actually, it might even need to be part of customer service training because it's a great way. Otherwise, we don't have consequences for these narcissistic folks, do we, right? I regularly go into businesses. In fact, I try not to as much as I can because I just hate how people treat people who work in businesses, who are frontline workers of any kind. It's just awful to watch. But I regularly see them being abused by dysregulated people. And it is, and they really, these folks are completely powerless. And in the era we live in, with people who have gotten so dysregulated, and if they have any form of weapon on them, could become quite dangerous. A lot of times these frontline workers actually have to be very, very careful. But the idea that a manager could roll up and say to someone, you've been fired, I wouldn't be surprised if that wouldn't work 60 to 70% of the time. Now, I don't know what they do if they have repeat customers, if any of those customers came back and then saw the fired person still working there. But if we know one thing about narcissistic shame, I will bet you that that person who threw that hot coffee tantrum won't show up again because narcissistic behavior is very shaped by shame. And remember, shame has to be a true public judgment. That's why shame often doesn't work one-on-one. You as an individual won't be able to shame the narcissist. But if they have a sense that there's some sort of public reckoning over their behavior or other people are aware of it, they will slink away like a little slime monster back into the swamp kind of thing. Like they'll just slide away. They do not like that idea of it being a public judgment and may not literally show up back to that place again. So that's something to keep in mind. So maybe without thinking about it, this person who's definitely not the asshole, in fact, I'd almost say is a little bit of a genius when it comes to managing narcissistic customers. I think more than a few companies might want to build this into their customer service manuals and really, really sort of see what a narcissist with their sort of tail between their legs, whose bullying actually results in real consequences, how they respond. So I like that one. Love to know your thoughts on that one. Did you think they were an asshole? I definitely didn't. This one's an interesting one. A little bit more subtle than some of the other ones we've talked about because it gets at a couple of themes. But am I the asshole for telling my friend her parents bought her house for her, not her? So this is an interesting one because at first I'm like, well, depends. So the backstory, the woman writing the letter is a 28-year-old woman, has a friend, also a 28-year-old woman, who purchased a house late last year. It's an awesome 2-story townhouse, and I've been over there plenty of times to help out with the moving, the decorating, and for hanging out. As mentioned in the title, her parents purchased the house for her and her partner. I truly have no issue with this as the housing market is terrible for buyers, so more power to them for being homeowners. I recently, unfortunately, inherited my parents' house, which is a 3-bedroom out in the sticks. And when she said unfortunately inherited, I obviously read between the lines and her because her parents passed. And at 28, that's a young age to have both parents pass. So she has her own home now, but I mean, I'd imagine if she liked her parents at a hell of a cost. The issue is this. We went appliance shopping, her and the friend, because most of the stuff in the house was 10 to 15 years old in the house that she inherited. We were standing with an employee who I had asked to recommend some smaller items like toasters and kettles when the employee asked if I was moving out, just making general chit-chat. I told him I was moving, and he asked whether I had bought or rented, and I told him I bought because it was just easier and less awkward than telling him I inherited the house. He told me that was cool and began talking about the toasters again when my friend cut in and said that I had inherited the house, not purchased it. The employee went quiet, and I gave her a "what was that" face. I was taken aback, and she continued on saying, "Yeah, I purchased my house." If that was my friend, I would not be pleased. I asked, "Does it really matter? I'm here to buy some kitchen appliances, not tell this guy my personal issues." She grinned and said, "It's just for the record." What record? What record does the man in the appliance store recommend that you would have to do that to someone who had their reasons for telling this sort of different version of the story for obviously not wanting to say they inherited it, whatever, okay? And then having to put a finer point on it and saying, well, I bought my house, when actually, honey, you didn't. So she grinned and said, "It's just for the record," which made me more confused and annoyed. You can probably see where this is going. I replied, "Oh, okay, then it's just for the record. Your parents purchased your house for you." The poor employee, can you imagine? This poor person's making minimum wage selling toasters and is saying, "I do not need this shit." Okay, the employee quickly retreated. The employee actually is an interesting player in this little drama. The employee quickly retreated, and then the friend walked outside the shop. I caught up with her, and she said I was a massive asshole for pointing out that she couldn't afford to own without her parents' help. This after this person forcing this friend, like sort of cornering them in front of someone else about inheriting the house and not purchasing it. I returned with a very similar, it's interesting. I returned with a very similar, so the person who wrote the letter said, "My parents also helped me with getting a house too, just in a really terrible way." I am reading that as actually a way to try to maybe even a little apologize. Just like, listen, I get that you needed help. I got my house through help, but in a very bad way. So it's not even like she kept lambasting the friend. She said like, okay, we both had help in weird ways, in my case, or sad ways. My partner agrees with me, saying that she's the one who opened that door. But our other friends are split almost 50-50. I don't agree. This one seems relatively clear to me. Edit, holy hell, this blew up. Sorry I wasn't clear with my friends being 50-50. Half think I'm not the asshole, and others think we're both assholes. Oh, okay. And I shouldn't have escalated the problem. Okay, so this is an interesting one. Like I said, there's a little subtlety here. Here's my guess on the dynamic. The friend whose parents purchased her the home, that there was likely some shame there. And that shame, in a way, it's almost as though she sees her friend, the one who wrote the letter, has her own home now, but got it through this really tragic way. But it's very possible the friend whose parents bought her the home might have thought that that was actually something you could talk about in a less sort of shamey way than my parents bought me a house. And the friend, the person who wrote the letter, said, "Listen, I think it's cool that her parents were able to do that for her. Like, more power to them. They had the money. It's tough for people to buy homes and on and on." She sadly did get her own home, but through this really bad path. Now, the person whose parents bought her the home is a better deal, assuming she likes her parents, and that's an assumption, but assuming she likes her parents get to come to this townhouse and enjoy it and be with her and spend time with her. The friend whose parents died, and that's how she got the house, she herself may be feeling a sense of grief. The letter writer may be feeling a sense of grief and not actually want to share that with that store employee, wherever the heck it was, whatever appliance store they were at, and maybe even not make that employee feel uncomfortable. To just take the easier way out. We do this all the time, by the way. There's a story that's a lot more gruesome. People split up for some reason, or someone acquires a house for some reason, or switches jobs, and they don't say, "Well, the reason this happened is because my husband cheated on me," or something like that. They're not going to tell that to a stranger and say, "Oh, it didn't work out, but that's why we're doing this separately." It's often to protect that third party. So when this person, instead of saying, "I inherited the house," because they're young, they're also not people in their 50s and 60s, right? 28 looks 28. So a young person is saying, "I inherited the house." I suppose, yes, the employee might think grandparent, whatever, but we also don't know how soon this was, how much grief there still may have been. But for the friend, for her unprocessed shame to say, "Well, no, actually, you inherited it, but I bought mine." I mean, honey, if you're going to do the dozens like that, you might as well own your shit, right? You might as well own that your house was bought for you and your friend inherited it. If you're going to go all in and try to be sort of Little Miss Transparency, then be Little Miss Transparency. And if I don't even see the point of that you would have to say, "No, toaster selling person, my friend inherited her house because her parents died and my parents bought me a house." To which this poor employee who's thinking, "I should be getting combat pay at time and a half for working with these people," is now going to say, "Okay, I didn't need to all know all this. Which toaster do you want?" Right? But this particular "Am I the Asshole" is interesting to me because it spoke to how there's many times these sort of unprocessed, shame-inducing experiences. Clearly the woman whose house was bought for her, like, just own your luck. There'll be something else in life where maybe the luck won't work out your way. Your friend didn't have really luck. They lost their parents prematurely, resulted in them having a house. But there's something so hurtful in trying to push that point because, again, the inheriting the house was associated with the loss of the parents. It doesn't really seem like a friendship, that somebody would sort of drop a dime on you as a way to sort of hide their own shame in front of somebody who doesn't care. I take umbrage at some of the commenters who are saying the letter writer, the person who called the friend out in front of the employee, was being an asshole for doing that. I think that also came out of hurt. And I'm even going to give the letter writer a little bit of credit because they're probably, again, going through a period of grief. And if they're just now furnishing this house or putting stuff in this house, the loss may have been within the last year. Again, 28, losing both parents, that's young. And so I think in that moment when you're so shocked that a friend of all people, and she said, "I helped this person move and decorate and all of that," but to have your friend sort of feel the need to shame you in front of a store employee, unfortunately, or fortunately, it just simply is, a lot of us will lash out under those circumstances and just say, "I can't believe you just did that." I guess the argument could have been made in an ideal world, the friend would have kept her mouth shut until they were outside of the store, not done it in front of the employee who was likely weirded out by the entire interaction. And when it was done, I guess that I would have given it a triple A if they could have done that. But then there's also this piece about this idea of all of us always having to be so damn over-controlled with all of these toxic people. Wait until the right moment and do it at the right moment. It's as though in order to coexist in a world with so many toxic people, we're having to learn how to be so over-controlled with our emotions at all times. It's actually not necessarily good for us. Having that kind of reaction of what the hell? It would be as though, I don't know, you were at a wedding dress buying store and you were buying a wedding dress and the person who was with you to buy the wedding dress said, "Oh, the reason they met is because they cheated on each other and that's how they ended up together." Would you really want the wedding dress store people to know that? No. It may not necessarily be the part of the story they're proud of. Maybe it ended up in a wedding, but the idea that the friend who said, "No, you didn't buy that house, you inherited it," gotta tell you, they kind of drew first blood. And this idea that the other person would have had to kind of keep it so under wraps until they were out in the street. I don't think that that's, I think there's a point at which we're asking people to restrain their emotions in a way that doesn't sound like she was shouting at her. It just basically said, oh, well, that's interesting. If you're going to make it about purchasing a house, please note that your parents purchased your house. I mean, again, I empathize with it. I understand it wasn't like perfection to do that, but these are the struggles here. These are the issues that toxic people bring into our lives. And this is something that comes up over and over again in the survivors I talk with, who say to me, what I hate most about the toxic friendships, toxic relationships with my family is that it brings out the worst in me. And I think in this Am I the Asshole, this person actually does recognize it brought out the worst in this person, that they may not be the person who wanted to sort of put a lens on the fact that their friend had to get help to buy a house or had to have the house given to them. Wasn't initially said they were quite happy with them, didn't have an issue with it. It only became an issue when this person felt the need to sort of make a point in the store. But as I said, I think what drove that is a person's shame. But we do know people who have shame that is so unchecked that leads them to do impulsive things. That dynamic is actually a pretty big piece of narcissism. So I'm giving this person not the asshole, and I actually understand why they felt that they kind of had that moment where they just said what they said. In an ideal world, sure, that poor employee wouldn't have been pulled out of it. You know, what's probably the most interesting hour of their day. So those are my thoughts. But again, it gets at some of the nuances of shame, of how we show up in front of other people, of how do we respond when we feel betrayed in a moment in such a low-stakes situation, an employee at an appliance store. But yet, sometimes those low-stakes situations that somebody would betray us in that place can feel far, far worse than in higher-stakes situations where there is more emotion involved. Am I the asshole for refusing to pay my husband for using a room in the house for my work-from-home job? I am a 32-year-old woman, and I began working from home 2 months ago. My husband bought the house we lived in before we got together. He calls it his property, which is fine by me. The house is small. It only has 2 rooms. I'm assuming this person means 2 bedrooms, one of which used to be empty until I started using it as an office for my job. All was going fine with my job until he sat me down last night saying he's expecting 30% profit from whatever I get from my job since he provides the office for my work. I was completely caught off guard by this. I asked if he was serious, and he went on about it being his home and how he could be using this room for his own purpose since it's his property. I said no and called him unreasonable, which led to a blow-up. I yelled at him saying he won't get a penny, and he pitched a fit and accused me of taking full advantage even though there's no mortgage to be paid. I do all chores in the house as well as pay my share of the bills by half. He got his family involved in this and they're split. His mother thinks I'm being difficult and that 30% is not a huge amount and that this room is providing stability for my work from home and so my work from home situation, and so my husband should get some sort of benefits. Am I the asshole for putting my foot down and refusing to pay a penny? This woman should work from a different home, which means move the hell out. Keep in mind, this is this woman's husband, okay? It's not someone, she's the husband. And all the legal issues that come up with property and all of that. I mean, I read this and I had to read it twice. The first thing it brought up for me, though, and again, I have no idea if this dude is narcissistic. Again, willing to take the bet. But what we do know is this. What we're seeing is a rigidity that we see in something called obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, right? Or I should say obsessive-compulsive personality style. And this is a style where a person is very rigid, really miserly, super controlling. There's absolutely no flexibility. They get caught up in things like my property, my stuff, my, me. You have to pay. In fact, these are people who might be 10 years into a marriage and still expect to split the check when you go out to eat with them. So this idea of a person being like this, and we can often see that this obsessive compulsive personality style can overlap with narcissistic personality styles. That's when you get that self-righteous kind of really, really rigid, controlling, again, financially super controlling kind of personality style. when I read this, I went right into problem solving mode. I mean, if it would be, it's the strangest thing, right? Because I suppose then would he want to, first thing this woman should be doing is contacting an attorney above all else. Honestly, if I were her, I don't know if this person lives someplace far away that's not a big city, this wouldn't work. But certainly in even mid-sized cities and definitely in larger cities, people can find like little offices that they could rent, like even like a, like shared office space that aren't even that expensive. If your job doesn't involve a lot of talking, you might even be able to do it in a library or something, and may even be able to find another small office to rent and then work with a tax advisor on how all of that works. But the fact that, to even suggest that 30% of the take, it also depends on how much this woman makes. But number one, she needs to be talking to an attorney and a tax advisor right away, which is sort of sad if you're in a marriage that you would have to approach it this way. And for somebody to take a third of somebody's salary as sort of rent for what they're doing, it's not worth it anymore. If I were her, the other thing I would be doing is asking your employer, can I come back into the office? And that would also keep her away from this terrible man. Given that his mother agrees with that, it leads me to think that the whole family has some sort of narrative around how she's taking advantage of Mr. Hardworking in his 2-room stinking house to be able to, ooh, she moved into his house and is taking advantage of it. And so it is, to me, this is this is the kind of thing, though, where this level of what will easily devolve into financial abuse. The other thing is, since she does all the chores, she might want to do a calculation on what a house cleaner would make in that area and on an hourly rate, and then do the calculation on that and maybe hand him an invoice. So if she says, sure, I'll give you the 30% and here's an invoice for my house cleaning, food prep services. Hell, she might even want to find out how much people get paid for sexual activity there and maybe charge him each time she has sex with him, performs any sort of sexual act on him. Might as well just keep the invoice running, because if she could also try to play his dirty ground game and then give him invoices for everything. And then maybe it'll kind of work out as a dead heat. But this kind of black and white rigidity about things like money and resources in a marriage, and the concept of getting married to someone is that there is some sort of level of collaboration and sharing at some level. And it's certainly a room that's not being used and is now being used. So she's not putting wear and tear on a car. She's not spending money on gas. She's in the house to receive deliveries or anything like that. That there's even an added service to that he's not able to see that. This is never going to be a healthy relationship. And so it's painful to have to realize, and sometimes these stresses come into relationships as real lessons, but this kind of rigidity is something we do see in toxic relationships, especially those with this obsessive compulsive personality flair. It's very rigid, miserly, controlling style. It really does sound like this relationship, if it's not already very controlling, is on its way to become so. And so either get back in the office or start giving this dude invoices, because if he's going to invoice you for something like that, there ain't no reason you can't invoice him for your skills and your time. So I feel really sad for this woman. I know a lot of folks who've been in toxic relationships have found themselves in these really controlled and controlling situations where everything comes down to the last penny. I've worked clinically with folks like this, and it is brutal. It feels fully transactional, and that's really what this relationship has devolved into. That's not a marriage, that's a landlord. This one is, am I the asshole for suing my parents for college money? Okay. My great aunt set up savings accounts for all of her female relatives. In our culture, education for women is not really valued, and she thought that was bullshit. She lived with her father in London, where she was educated. She went on to attend university and become a doctor. She married a British man. They moved to America and had a great life. She funded the education of as many of her nieces and grandnieces as she could. When she passed away, she left money for every girl relative she could. My parents managed to access the accounts that were set up for my sister and I. They used it to pay for my brother's wedding. My sister didn't care because she got married 2 years out of high school and had no intention of going to college. When I graduated high school, I went to the bank to get money for school, and it was almost all gone. There was like $13,000 left. I asked my parents about it, and they said they had needed the money. I finally found out where the money went. I got furious. I got student loans and moved out. I am a great source of shame to them, and they don't give two you-know-what. I am currently suing them for the money that was left for me. My entire family is against me. They all think I am a complete asshole for airing private family business in public and that I'm putting money ahead of family. My friends are all on my side, but they are all Americans and don't really get my culture. Neither do I, to be honest. My brother called me up and offered to pay for my university if I dropped the lawsuit. I agreed, as long as we had a legally binding contract. He said I was being an asshole for not trusting him. I said he should not have accepted my money for his wedding. It is causing all kinds of embarrassment in our community now, I guess this whole scenario. I am somewhat ashamed to be doing this, but I don't want to have this debt I should not have. Ooh, honey, you are not the asshole, and good for you for going out there and getting that education, and good for your aunt for making sure there was money for the female relatives. I'd say the only place your aunt didn't dot her I's and cross her T's is not realizing that your parents are very, very entitled, selfish, maybe narcissistic people. Now, this Am I the Asshole actually brings up something very interesting for me around culture and narcissism, right? Such a complicated conversation. No matter what, money was given for a purpose. The parents didn't value that purpose, so they felt entitled and egocentric enough to do what they wanted with little regard for appreciating the individuation, the autonomy of their own children, and went ahead, and of course brother, my guess is golden child, used the money there, no one in the family stopping this, them having no problem. They stole from her. Let's just call this what this is. This is theft, right? She could probably go get them criminally if she wanted to. But I actually totally agree with her lawsuit. And good for her for recognizing that Mr. Golden Child brother, she would need a contract with him because you knew he was scamming her just to get the lawsuit off their back, right? That's manipulation. I'll say whatever you want to hear, future fake. So you will stop doing something I don't want. Lawsuit, and then you'll never see the money. And he'll say, I never said that. I can promise you that right now. So she's clever. In a way, what's so interesting is that this scenario has put her where she needed to be, which is to get the hell away from this family. I mean, unfortunately, with many, many toxic families, and that toxicity can get magnified when they use culture as the excuse. Listen, nobody, you want to get into a culture battle with me? Let me tell you, first gen, born in this country of very traditional South Asian parents, I could win that smackdown all day, all night. So trust you me, I get from culture. I understand it. I get it. It shaped my life. It was hard for me to do certain things. I understand it. None of it is right. And so I think that this idea of it's culture. I understand her shame. That shame is so deeply internalized. And that's going to be a process that she goes through as she has the support of friends. She says her friends in the United States are supportive of her. They're hearing her. They're validating her. No, they don't get the culture. And ideally, she would find like a therapist who is of that culture so they could appreciate why this is so difficult for her, but really steadfastly can say she did the right thing. The way when you get culture meets narcissism, or culture meets this kind of pathological entitlement, when those things come together, it can be an almost impossible cycle to break. Clearly, her sister went exactly the way the family wanted her to. Graduated high school, in short order found a husband, and she's off pretty much repeating the same cycle, may do the same thing to her own kids. Her brother will probably do the same thing to his own kids. And then there comes that one person in the family, it's often the truth teller or truth seer, who says, oh, hell no, I'm not doing this anymore. And she may very well break away from it, a bit like her aunt did, get educated, start a different kind of life, and hopefully this will not happen with her children. But that kind of shame and the way the family basically becomes this big mob, this moving mush of enablers that becomes such a united front, it would leave someone like her feeling, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing. Maybe this really is bad. Maybe this really is disrespectful. No, what was disrespectful was your parents stealing money that was meant to give you an opportunity, to give you a leg up, to keep you safer and stronger and better in the world because you have an education with which you might be able to pursue a career or financial independence. But no, your parents were quite content to keep you caught in that same cycle of dependency. To me, that's just not right. I don't care what culture you're in. And so, and listen, that idea that they would feel that so entitled to the money and saying, well, figure it out, just figure it out, when there was money set aside. It's not as though this person was saying there was no money set aside and I expected them to pay for it. Someone actually made a bequest in this name. So talk about disrespecting women. They not only disrespect you, they disrespected your aunt who left this money with a very, very clear purpose. So, you know, those of you who say, no, 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 we have to respect all cultures. We should respect cultures and hear them. But at the end of the day, selfishness, entitlement, all this nonsense, I don't care what culture you're from, it doesn't make it okay. It's going to make it more difficult, though, for the survivors. So what I often won't do is sign off on this behavior because it's cultural. But I will definitely take a step back and know that the survivor experience for people who grow up in these cultures is so much harder. So to her, I say, good for you. Take them to court, teach them a lesson. There'll be a lot of grief for a person like this because they are effectively sort of distancing themselves from their family in a very permanent way. If they're willing to pony up the cash without you having to take them to court, have them place it in an escrow account, have it sitting there and saying, thanks so much, and you can go from there. But anything less than that, don't take any promises, hon. And yeah, this is again where culture meets money, meets this kind of entitlement. Good luck with that. Hope that was helpful. Sure you had different opinions, and thanks again.